You've probably noticed it. The TV seems quieter than it used to be. People at restaurants seem to mumble more than they did a few years ago. You ask people to repeat themselves more than you'd like to admit. And you've probably told yourself the same thing everyone tells themselves. It's just my ears. It's just age. Here's what almost nobody explains to you. That hearing loss you've been brushing off, it might not just be about your ears at all. It could be a sign that your brain is quietly losing ground years before any memory problem shows up. My name is Dr. Peter Vale, and today I'm going to show you the real connection between your hearing and your brain, what's actually happening, why it matters far more than most people realize, and what you can do about it starting this week. If this channel is new to you, subscribe now. Every week, I cover what your doctor knows but didn't have time to explain. Let's get into it. By the end of this video, you'll understand three things. Why hearing loss and brain health are far more connected than anyone tells you at a hearing test. Why the danger isn't the hearing loss itself, it's what happens inside your brain because of it. And the specific steps that research shows can actually slow this down. Starting with something far simpler than you'd expect. Stay with me, because the next part is the piece that changes how you think about that ringing phone you didn't quite hear. Let's start with something most people get wrong. Hearing loss after 60 is treated like a cosmetic problem, an inconvenience, something you deal with by turning the TV up a little louder or asking your spouse to repeat the punchline. But here's the thing. Your brain doesn't experience sound the way a microphone does. Sound isn't just received. It's processed, understood, pieced together into words and meaning. That work happens in your brain, using brain power, every single moment you're listening to someone talk. When your ears stop sending clear signals, your brain doesn't just shrug and move on. It compensates. And that compensation has a cost nobody warns you about. Here's what's actually happening inside your head when hearing starts to fade. Your brain has a limited amount of processing power at any given moment. Think of it like a budget. Normally, a healthy ear sends a clean, clear signal to the brain, and the brain spends very little effort turning that signal into understood words. But when hearing loss sets in, even mild hearing loss, the signal coming in is weaker, fuzzier, harder to make out. So your brain has to work much harder just to figure out what was said. It pulls resources away from other jobs to cover that gap. Researchers call this cognitive load. And here's the part that surprises most people. The areas of the brain that get pulled in to help with that extra listening effort are the same areas your brain uses for memory and thinking. So every conversation where you're straining to catch the words, your brain is quietly borrowing power from your memory and thinking centers just to keep up. Do that for a few minutes, no real harm. Do that for years, every single day, in nearly every conversation you have, and that's a very different story. And here's what I want you to stay with me for. Because the next part explains something that even surprised researchers when they first found it. It's not just that the brain works harder. Hearing loss actually appears to change the physical structure of the brain over time. And once I show you where, you'll understand why doctors are starting to take hearing loss far more seriously than a simple inconvenience. There's a landmark body of research here, led by Dr. Frank Lin and his team at Johns Hopkins University. In a series of studies tracking thousands of older adults over many years, Dr. Lin's team found something striking. People with untreated hearing loss had a significantly higher risk of developing dementia compared to people with normal hearing, and the risk rose with the severity of the hearing loss. Mild hearing loss roughly doubled dementia risk. Moderate hearing loss roughly tripled it. Severe untreated hearing loss was linked to nearly 5 times the risk. Let that sit for a second. Not a small increase, up to 5 times higher. Why would hearing loss do that? Brain imaging studies give us part of the answer. Researchers have found that areas of the brain involved in processing sound and language, when they're underused because of hearing loss, actually begin to shrink faster than normal. That's called brain atrophy, and it simply means brain tissue losing volume over time. There's also the isolation piece. When conversations become exhausting, when you're constantly straining to follow what people are saying, many people quietly start avoiding social situations, skipping the family dinner because the noise is too much to follow, saying no to the group lunch because you're tired of nodding along, hoping you got the gist. And social isolation on its own is one of the strongest known risk factors for cognitive decline. So hearing loss creates a kind of double hit. It strains the brain directly, and it pulls people away from the social connection that protects the brain in the first place. Let me tell you about someone I'll call Harold. 71 years old, retired accountant, sharp as a tack his whole life. The guy everyone called when they couldn't remember a number from 20 years ago. About 3 years before he came to see me, Harold started noticing the TV volume creeping up. Conversations at restaurants got harder to follow. He started avoiding the noisy family gatherings he used to love, telling everyone he was just tired. His daughter brought him in because she'd noticed something else. He seemed slower, forgetting names mid-conversation, repeating questions. When we ran a hearing test, Harold had moderate hearing loss in both ears, something he hadn't addressed because, in his words, I didn't think it was a big deal. We got him fitted with hearing aids. Within the first month, he told me conversations felt less exhausting. Within 6 months, he was back at the family gatherings he'd been avoiding for years. A year later, his daughter called to tell me something I think about often. She said her dad seemed sharper than he had in years. He was telling stories again, engaging in conversations the way he used to, instead of nodding along and hoping he'd caught enough to follow. Harold told me afterward that nobody had ever explained to him that ignoring his hearing might be costing him more than just conversations. That is exactly why I made this video. Now, 2 things I want to be clear about. First, hearing loss does not guarantee dementia, and treating hearing loss is not a guaranteed cure or prevention. This is about risk reduction, not certainty. The research shows a strong association and growing evidence that treatment helps, but every person's situation is different. Second, this isn't about waiting until hearing loss becomes severe. Most of the research showing the biggest benefit from treatment is in people who address hearing loss early, before the brain has spent years compensating. So what does the evidence say about what actually helps? A major clinical trial called the Achieve study, published in the Lancet in 2023, followed older adults at higher risk for cognitive decline. Among that higher risk group, those who received hearing aids and hearing support showed a 48% slower rate of cognitive decline over 3 years compared to those who didn't. 48% slower. From hearing aids, not a drug, not a supplement, a device that's been available for decades. The reason it works ties back to everything we just covered. When your brain stops straining to compensate for poor hearing, that processing power goes back to doing what it's supposed to do. And when conversations become easier again, people stay socially connected, which protects the brain even further. Here is exactly what to do after this video. 1. Stop treating hearing loss like a minor inconvenience. If you've noticed yourself turning up the volume, asking people to repeat themselves, or avoiding noisy gatherings, write those moments down. Patterns matter more than any single instance. 2. Get a real hearing test. Not a quick app on your phone, an actual audiologist or hearing specialist. Many primary care offices can refer you, and many tests are covered by insurance or Medicare. This is the starting point for everything else. 3. If hearing loss is found, even mild, don't wait. The research consistently shows the biggest brain protective benefit comes from addressing hearing loss early, not after years of strain. 4. If you're already avoiding social situations because conversations feel exhausting, notice that pattern and push back against it. That isolation is doing its own separate damage. Treating your hearing can help you get back to the people and conversations you've been quietly avoiding. 5. If someone in your life has been turning up the TV, asking what more often, or going quiet in group conversations, this video is for them too. Send it to them. Sometimes it takes someone else pointing it out before we take our own hearing seriously. Your hearing and your brain were never 2 separate systems. They've been working together your entire life. And when one starts to struggle quietly, the other pays a cost that takes years to show up, long after the moment you could have done something simple about it. Now you know what to look for. If this gave you something your appointments never did, subscribe to Dr. Peter Vale, Senior Signals, and hit like on this video. That is how we reach more people who've been brushing off their hearing without knowing what's really at stake. Share this with someone you know who's been turning up the volume a little more each year. It might be the conversation that changes everything for them. I'll see you in the next one.